Welcome to another edition of MamaTokTok, A Different Take. I'm your host, Abi Mambo, and I am pleased you're joining us for this special edition on This is What Child Sexual Abuse Looks Like. Our guest today is Manyi Anabor, author of Cactus in the Calabash, a memoir in which she chronicles her experiences as a child sexual abuse survivor at the hands of a household member. Be advised that the content of this episode may be sensitive for some viewers and listeners, so proceed with caution. And after today's program, please join us tomorrow for the finale of the show.
Manny, what a pleasure to have you on.
It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm very, very happy you reached out. And so I'll just start by introducing myself.
Absolutely.
So my name is Manyi Anabor, and I have 3 children. I live and work in London, and I've lived here for at least 20 years. Have always worked in sexual health, and I currently work as a domestic violence advocate. I work with women and children who have experienced domestic abuse. And I am also the author of a book called Cactus in a Calabash, which is about child sexual abuse.
So, in case you haven't picked up on it yet, we will be talking about child sexual abuse. And Manny, this is not just something that you work on. It's not just a book that you wrote. Mm-hmm. This is a very personal story and a very personal journey for you. And so before we even get into it, I just want to thank you for coming on here to share your story, because I think prior to the Me Too movement, not a lot of people were able or willing to talk about it, just given the repercussions of what happened to women and sometimes children when they dare to speak up about sexual abuse. So I will just let you start from wherever you want to start in terms of how you got to be on this journey that you're on right now.
Okay, thank you very much, AB. So I'll start from the beginning. Obviously, it's been a long road for me, and it's still, I'm still on that journey to recovery. My abuse started when I was 8 years old. I grew up in Cameroon in a household with my family, and we lived with extended family as well. We have house helps, servants, call it whatever you may. We had a houseboy who was 27 years old, came to work for us, and he began to groom me. In hindsight now, I believe he began to groom me soon after he came to start working for us. I would like to explain what his grooming process was, just so people can get an idea of how it usually works, or how it worked in my case. Yeah. So when he came to work for us, I think he immediately realized I was very close to my dad. And so he decided to ensure that he alienated me from my dad. How he did this was he did this by using my dad's house rules against me. So my dad was very, very strict and never really let us go out without permission. And even with permission, you still couldn't go out. So, but my mom was more lenient. So my mom would let us go out, but make sure that you come back. And go out. By going out, I mean just going across the road to play with our friends in our friends' houses or just outside. Yeah. So how mine began was, and I'm trying to summarize this, but how mine began was, I went out to play once with my mom's permission, and on returning home at about 6 o'clock, I'd been out for about an hour playing with my friends. And when I came home, the houseboy, whose name was George, cornered me at the front of the house, and he held my arm really strongly and asked me where I was coming from. And I said I'd gone to my friend's house to play, and he threatened me. He spoke to me sternly and said I should never ever go out again, even if it's with my mom's permission. And he said, because she is not the authority in this house, my dad is. And if you dare tell her that I did this to you, I will tell your dad that your mom has been letting you go out without his permission. So I didn't say anything to my mom. And the reason why is because I believed that I had done something wrong, because my dad would not have let me go out. So I would be in the wrong if he reported me to my dad. So I didn't say anything. Now he carried on doing this progressively, and now I know that in hindsight, but at the time I didn't realize because I was just a child.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So he did this progressively. He would do little things like that, pinch me, warn me, threaten me when I did something which went against my dad's rules. And then I would not report. So I kept not reporting, and he realized I was not reporting. So he was getting me in that corner where he would be confident enough to know that if he did things, if he kept stepping up and doing more things to me, I still would not report. So it progressed to the point where, and this was only within a few months, it progressed to the point where he got us the kids to start doing chores. We always did chores at home, but
Yeah.
he got us to specifically do his chores. And when we did the chores, he would commend us, and he even got my parents involved and told them, oh, they do chores really well. And my grand aunts and grand uncles were at home sometimes. They came over to visit, and so they would always applaud us for doing all these chores. But then he stepped it up after some time and got me in particular to do all the chores with no help, all his chores when we came back from school. Mind you, I was only 8 years old. He wouldn't he when he first came to the house to work for us, he was very hardworking. He was always a step ahead of everyone. He would wash the car in the morning before my parents woke up. He would polish my parents' shoes. He would make sure our breakfast was ready, serve it at the table. So they liked him so much. And then he steadily began to fall back on his duties and got us to do them, knowing that I would not report. So I'm trying to set the scene for how he did it and why I kept quiet for a long time. So so it progressed quite rapidly, if I must say. And I began to do his chores, and I didn't particularly like doing them, but because my grandmom would see me washing the dishes and she would applaud me and say, well done. And my dad would come home from work, and George would tell my dad, oh, she did this today, she did that today. It was really, and he would applaud me too. And I think I lived to please my dad. I thrived off his compliments.
Yeah.
So the more compliments I got from him, the more I did to prove that I was hardworking and I could do chores at home. Right. So it got to a point where I actually stopped liking my dad, and I believe that he didn't trust me anymore because George planted seeds in my head. He planted seeds of doubt. So he would always tell me things like, your father, yes, he calls you smart and intelligent and eloquent, but he actually doesn't mean those things. Grown-ups lie to children all the time. And mind you that we spend a lot of time with him at home, with George at home. So he had so much time to feed me with all these things. And he went as far as, if, for instance, someone came to visit my dad and George went to answer the door and they said they've come to see my dad would send George back to the person and say, no, I don't want to see them. And then George will immediately point out to me, did you see that? Did you see that? Your father is a liar. He's at home, but he says we should say he's not home. And so as an 8-year-old, I was like, oh my goodness, that's so true. My dad is a liar. And then I started disbelieving my dad and just worrying that he didn't really care about me. And every time he gave me compliments, I didn't believe him anymore. So I stopped talking to my dad. I used to have dinner with my dad all the time. I stopped having dinner with him. I just pushed back from him because I was just, as a child, you like, he's a liar. He doesn't tell me the truth. And so that's how my relationship with my dad became. So I'm doing the chores and I'm not reporting to anyone that I'm doing the chores. My mom was working full time. My dad was working full time as well. My dad was a barrister and a solicitor of his own business, and he worked 6 days a week because he was very passionate about his job. My mom worked at SNEC, the water company, and she finished work at like 4:00, came home. So we were always at home with George after school. I progressed to him slapping me, and some physical abuse started, and I would still not report because he would threaten me that he caught me washing dishes, and I fell asleep washing dishes once. I was seated and he slapped me, and I was shocked, obviously. And he said, well, if I report to my dad, then my dad will be very disappointed in me. He used that phrase a lot, that my dad will be very disappointed in me. So I tended not to report to my dad, because he always used things that he knew that would prevent me from going to report to my dad. So progressed to the day when he decided to expose himself to me. I was washing dishes in my mom's kitchen, and I had been instructed to wash the dishes by George. Everyone else was kind of in the front yard, not inside the house. And mind you, this is a house of approximately 30 people during third term holidays, which is summer holidays. But because it's a house of about 30 people on average, it was a big house. So there were always sections of the house that were vacant. No one's there. Everyone is like outside, just chatting and hanging out. So he took advantage of that as well. He had come outside, and he said, Manyi, come inside, come and show me where you kept the envelope. I didn't know what envelope he was talking about, but I went with him because I was already scared of him at that point. So I went in with
How
him.
old were you then?
I was 8. I was 8. And so I went in with him, and we went into the kitchen. Our kitchen, the lighting in my mom's kitchen was not very, it was like, it was one light bulb, which was covered in soot from smoke for over months, right? So it was not very well lit. And so I stood there. He said, wash those dishes. And so I realized, oh, he had actually called me in here referring to an envelope, whereas there was no envelope. He just wanted me to wash dishes, which I did not mind doing. I washed the dishes, and he left the kitchen. As soon as then at some point I heard someone walking behind me. I turned and looked, and it was him. He was just standing there. I carried on washing the dishes. Then he said my name, Manyi. I turned around and looked, and he had pulled down his pants, and he was stark naked. You know, he had no pants on. So I was shocked, and I dropped the plate I was washing, and just stood there with my back to him. He kept saying, turn and look, turn and look. Why are you not looking? Why are you not looking? But whispering. Yes. And I was shaking and, just shocked. I didn't know what to do. And before you know it, I felt him behind me, very up close next to me. And so I felt him on me, and then I ran out of the kitchen. I ran into the children's bedroom, which is where I slept with my 2 brothers who were 6 and 3. And the room was empty, obviously, because everyone was outside hanging out in the front yard. So George came into the room and was kind of laughing and saying, why did I run off? Why am I crying? Why am I overreacting? He was just joking. I was just joking. Okay, don't cry, don't cry, don't cry. He said, you're crying now. If your mom comes and sees you crying, because my mom was home. He said, if your mom comes and sees you crying, she'll be upset that I've made you cry. She'll not understand that I was joking. I was just joking. And I believed him. And so, yes, I believed him. Because he was very playful. He was very manipulative. And he's 27 and I'm 8. So, I've been asked this question before, like, why didn't you say something? It's very, very, that's why I like that I'm in this position to be able to narrate what your mindset is when you're 8 years old, and then you have a 27-year-old who has specific intentions, specific motives. They know exactly what to do. They know exactly what to say. Yeah. So that is the mindset. It's a power thing. And so I didn't say anything, and I honestly believe that I overreacted that day. From that day on, it just progressed to even worse or bigger things. I still used to shower with my brothers who were 6 and 3 years old. We used to shower, not every time dutifully, but if we happen to be if any of them happen to be showering, I would get in and I'll shower with them as well. So my mom had not specifically told me, you're 8 years old, nobody should see you naked. She had never said that to me. So that's one thing I always stress to people. Please start teaching your kids from a young age.
That particular point, Manny, is one that haunts me, because we all did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know how you grow up in these big compounds with all these boys from wherever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're 6, you're 7, you're 8, you're running around. When it's time to bathe, they bring the big baths and all the children bathe out of it.
Exactly.
Nobody's thinking that somebody is looking at a child.
No.
Thinking about things.
No.
And I'll let you finish your story, but there are few things that just in listening to you, there's so much misogynistic rubbish that was going on. The idea that, daddy's girl, right? And a lot of who you were at that age came from adulation from your dad. And then
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
What it does to a child's self-esteem. And then the whole idea of him just taking over the house.
Yes.
And insinuating himself. And, the people who are going to say, well, where was your mother or where were your parents? But I think in the African context, if you haven't had like a house help, it's hard to understand like how interwoven. A lot of African families take pride in their house help being a part of the family.
Yes.
So not a lot of people are thinking about this as a stranger, right?
No.
We tend to watch strangers more. But if you say George is family, George is family.
It's family. Yes, exactly. And that's that's what he was for us. And I'm glad you mentioned the fact that he seemed to have just taken over, because that's exactly what it was with him. He came in. He was so impressive in how he worked, and my parents were so impressed. All they spoke about was how amazing he was and how well he cleaned and how strategic he was in running the household. And he doubled up as a security guard as well. Right. So exactly. So they loved him, and as children, or as a child, I'll speak for myself, I heard this during our car rides to school every morning. All they spoke about was him and how amazing he was. We've never had a house help as good as him. So then I'm put in this position. How then do I go and tell these two parents of mine who love and adore this guy that he hit me yesterday? Why did he hit you? Because I went out to play. Are you supposed to go out to play? No. So shut up. And it was that's the way it was. And if you think about it, as these we were kids, we were little kids, and he came in so the next point I was going to make actually was how he took it to the next step, whereby after he exposed himself to me and told me he was joking, then he came into the bathroom. He walked into the bathroom when I was having a shower one day. Even though my mom had not said we should, had not specifically spoken about me showering and, don't expose yourself to anyone. I always just, out of habit, used to lock the door when I'm having a shower. Yeah. But on this particular day, I didn't lock it, and he walked in. He walked in. Obviously, he knew I was there because of the way in which he walked in. He walked in and shut the door immediately behind him and locked it. So he knew it was me who was in there. He didn't even glance. He just opened it and walked in and locked the door. And I just was stunned. And I had finished showering and I had my towel over me. So I just had it here, right? So here. And he asked me something to the effect of, why am I covering myself? And I said, well, I finished showering. And he said, are you sure? And I said, let me see. And, and I was like, I finished. And he said, but he pointed at my foot and said, there's still soap on my foot. Rinse it off. So I went to casually open up the tap and rinse my foot. And he said, no, put the towel here, because he wanted to see me. And it was baffling to me, even though I didn't think that I should not be exposing myself, but still it was just not right. Your intuition as a child. So he forcefully took the towel from me and then asked me to rinse myself. But as soon as he took the towel, for some reason, I don't know if it's God, but I instinctively turned to the side. So I was facing the shower head, but my side was facing George, who was at the door. So I rinsed myself that way. And then he said I should turn around and rinse this side because he wanted to see me from the front. I did not. I still stood the same way and rinsed the part that he said I should rinse. And then I extended my hand towards the left, towards him, and asking for my towel. And he refused to give it to me. and said I should turn around first and let him see. And I did turn around, and I will never ever forget. I can still feel it now. I still remember what it felt like as he stared at my chest and my naked body, my naked 8-year-old body, the way I felt with him staring at me. And I didn't understand it, but right at that, he just kept staring, and I felt so uncomfortable. My heart started racing. And then I heard my mom's voice. My mom called for him behind the house and said he should come and do something. So he rushed out and shut the door quickly. And I remember just standing there crying quietly, but I kept wondering in my mind, because I was a very deep thinker, and I kept wondering, but why am I crying? He didn't do anything he didn't say anything to me. Why are you crying? What's wrong with you? He hasn't done anything. But it's just human nature. You feel the eeriness in this.
Our body talks to
Of
us.
course.
Talks to us. It's like, you know.
Exactly.
We have this stuff, and they all just communicate to us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I used to like writing down my thoughts. I just used to like writing. And I remember writing about that particular incident that same night when I was in my bed. And I remember trying to rationalize it. And I still have all these notes that I wrote from when I was a child, dated back from 1988. And I remember writing about it, and I was trying to rationalize it. And I convinced myself that I just overreacted about nothing. And then I went to sleep. After that, the next step he made was he started talking to me about things. He asked me one day, do I know what Fatex is? You know, Fatex is the brand of sanitary pads used in Cameroon. So he asked me if I knew. Yes. So it's all obviously now I know what he was doing. He was trying to it's part of the grooming process. So he asked me if I knew what Fatex was. I said yes, I did. Oh, what is it used for? He wants to know what I know about my sexual development, or am I on my period yet? Or, and then, so he started asking me about Fatex. I knew what Fatex was. He asked me how I knew it. I said, well, I've seen my mom putting it in her underwear. He said, but what is it used for? I said, I don't know. He said, oh, okay. Like laughing, like, don't worry, I'll tell you. But if I tell you, if I teach you, you have to keep it to yourself. Things like that. And then he asked me if I knew what kissing was. I said, no, I didn't. And he could tell that he could tell I was lying. The only reason why I said I didn't know what it was because whenever there was like on television a kissing scene, my dad would shout at us and say, "Leave the house, go to your room." So I knew there was a negative connotation around kissing.
So, kissing comes over.
Right, you did not see anything. So he asked me if I knew what that was. I said no. He said, "Oh, you're lying." But it was just very odd. That was off to me. And after that conversation with him, I remember thinking to myself, I think I need to tell my mom this. I know he said I shouldn't tell my mom, but I'm going to tell my mom.
Yeah.
So I mustered a lot of courage and decided to tell my mom. My mom was a very quiet and differential person. And she still is like that today. So I went into her room. I remember she was lying on her bed, wearing glasses, lying and reading a copy of Woman's Own magazine. It's a magazine she was subscribed to for years and years and years. And she was reading a copy. I sat at the base of her bed next to her legs. And we never really had conversations, honestly.
Yeah.
So I went into her room, sat there next to her legs, greeted her. She said, "How are you?" I said, "Fine." And I just sat there, which was normal. She would not ask. So nothing.
Where was your heart? Where was your heart? You're just about to tell your mom this thing.
Yes, I was scared, really scared. I had actually practiced what I would tell her and what I would not say. So if I remember very clearly, I had decided to tell her that about the Fatex conversation, to tell her about and he asked me about menses as well. I didn't know what menses was. So I was going to tell her that he said that, and kissing, about him asking me about kissing. So sat there for a while. I don't know how long it was, but to me it felt like I was there for ages, quiet, just wondering, should I say it, should I not say it? Because she was still reading her magazine quietly. And
do you remember why of how you made the decision between what to tell her and not tell her? Like,
Yeah.
how did you come to the process of, okay, Pat is okay, but him in the bathroom with my phone is not okay to tell
Right.
mom?
Yes. So because I felt like it was easy, I wanted to tell her the things that I felt like that made me feel uncomfortable, but she will not be upset with me about. I was not at fault for that, for any of those. So him coming into the bathroom, yes, at the time I thought there was something wrong with it, but I convinced myself while I was writing about it and trying to rationalize the event, I convinced myself that there's probably nothing wrong with it. I'm not really sure, but let me tell her about the things which would not, are least likely to make her upset with me. So,
That's a,
so I,
you're managing this crazy 27-year-old pedophile,
exactly,
and
exactly.
then you're managing your mom's emotions or
Exactly.
her reactions, and
Yeah,
then managing this relationship with your dad that has changed.
exactly. It was a
And
lot. It was a lot. It was a lot. So I sat there for what felt like a long, long time to me. And then I decided to start, in that moment, I decided to start off with the Fatex conversation. So I just said, mommy, she said yes. She said, I said, Uncle George, we used to call him Uncle George. Uncle George asked me if I knew what Fatex was. Exactly, Uncle. I said, Uncle George asked me if I knew what Fatex was. And she didn't even take her eyes off the magazine or even over her glasses. She carried on reading. But what she said was, and what did you say? Oh no, she asked me, why did he ask you? And I said, I don't know. She said, and what did you say? When she said, and what did you say? That's when she looked at me. That's when she took her eyes off the magazine. And it's just the way she looked at me that made me feel like, oh shit, I am in trouble.
yeah,
So I lied. I didn't tell her what I actually said because the conversation that actually took place between George and myself was he asked me and I said he asked me how I knew what pads were and I said, well, I've seen my mom using them in her underwear. And so, but when she asked me, what did you say? I wasn't going to tell her that that's what I said because she was looking at me angry. Well, she looked like she was upset. And I thought she was upset with me. So now that I feel like she's upset with me, I'm not going to tell her, I told him I've seen you put it on your underwear. So I just shrugged my shoulders and said nothing. I didn't say anything. She knew I was lying. I could tell that she knew I was lying, but my heart was pounding at that point. Now, how am I going to carry on to tell her the rest of what I have to say? I sat there and contemplated it and contemplated it. And she kept quiet. She said nothing after that. And then I got a little bit of courage again. And then I said, he also asked me if I knew what something called menses was. And she asked me again, and what did you say? This time she put her magazine down. What did you say? And I shrugged my shoulders. I said, I didn't know what to say because I don't know what menses is. I've never heard of it before. Then she said, or she appeared to think about it for a little while. And then she said, they better not start bringing their habits here. I didn't know what habits she was talking about. I didn't know what that meant. I was 8 years old. It means nothing to me. And then she was quiet. She carried on reading. I wasn't going to tell her anything else because her temperament had changed and it was kind of negative, and I assumed it was negative towards me. I thought she was upset with
yeah,
me. What do I know? So that was that's something which I always try to tell people. You need to communicate with your kids better, be open, and just explain things and talk to them properly. But anyway, after this incident, I didn't know that my mom was going to confront George. She did. I don't know what she said to him or whatever it was that happened, but that night he called for me to a corner of the house, which was behind the house, which was dark and not lit. And he pulled my ear and twisted it and asked me, why did I go and tell my mom that he'd been asking me questions about pads and periods? And
this man has just taken over your family home. Eh? He was
he
just
did. He did.
Guy in charge.
Very free. He was in charge. He really was. They gave him power, too much power too soon. And so I begged him and I pleaded with him. He told me to shut my mouth and he slapped me. He slapped me with his fist, with his knuckles, and it got a little bit swollen, slightly swollen. And as soon as he slapped me and I screamed, he covered my mouth because, look, there are always people in our household. It wasn't, so he never wanted us to scream out loud for people to hear. And so he said, "Oh, look at what you've made me do." He ran off to get a towel, put in cold water, came and pressed it, and he starts feigning tears. He was crying.
Can we just pause there for a second? That line, that is the classic abuser line in any dynamic. Look what you made me do.
Exactly.
Every time I hear that statement, I'm just like, there's something about this power dynamic that is not right. I don't care if it's husband, wife, parent, child. Once the responsibility for your actions is based on somebody else, something is
there's a problem. Yeah. So that's what he said. And of course, I believed him. He starts crying while pressing my cheek with the cold towel and saying, I cannot tell my mom, please, I can't tell her it was a mistake. It was my fault because I went blabbing to her about this. These are things that he's trying to tell me, he's trying to teach me. These are things that my parents and other adults in the house will not teach us. They don't trust us. They don't want to tell kids, but it's good for us to know. He always made it seem like he was on my side. And the thing is, I believed him. He spent so much time with me. I believed everything he said because he spent time working on me. He made sure that if I appeared to look like I was doubting anything he said, he would come back again with it and dwell on it and dwell on it and dwell on it until he saw that I believed what he was saying. So of course I didn't tell my mom about the incident behind the house where he twisted my ear and slapped me because of because I reported to her about the fatex and the periods. So obviously that's physical abuse going up and getting more and more. I remember the first time he whipped me, the very first time he whipped me with something other than his hand. I had come back from school and I brought home I think it was a homework that had been marked and I had 9 out of 10. And he starts shouting. One thing I failed to mention earlier, it's very obvious he's not very literate. He doesn't speak good English. He doesn't write or read very well at all. And I used to correct his English when he had first come to the house. But then at some point I realized that he did not particularly like being corrected. And he would always give me a very, very scary, eerie look. So I stopped correcting him. And even when he made mistakes, I would just go along with whatever he was saying. So on this particular day, I came home with a homework which was marked 9 out of 10. And he starts shouting at me, "Why did you get 9 out of 10? In my mind, I thought, okay, he doesn't understand that 9 out of 10 is actually good. So he was shouting and shouting, your father is going to deal with you when he gets back. I said, but, I got 9. I only got 1 wrong. And he said, "You know what? Go and bring a cane. Go and bring your cane." And so I thought, he said, "Your father will deal with you." I went confidently. I cut a cane from the hibiscus bush and gave him because I thought he was keeping the cane, wanted to keep the cane for my dad. Right. As soon as I handed it to him, because it was quite a thin branch. As soon as I handed it to him, in one swift motion, he grabbed it and whipped me. I was shocked because no one had ever hit me with anything in my life, ever. Nobody. And
here was Uncle
no.
George.
Yes. But beating was not foreign to me. People did get beaten in the house by my dad and my mom. They did get beaten. If you do something wrong and it's really serious, they'll beat you with cane. So it was not uncommon for me to see beatings. And George had experienced other cousins in the house being beaten. But for some reason, and I don't think it was deliberate or it was strategic, I just had never been beaten by my parents ever. I was the only one in the house, and it was kind of a running joke that, Manyi is the only one who has not been beaten. One day you get beaten. So when he whipped me, that day was so strange. I had never been whipped ever in my life. And here was this guy whipping me, and he carried on. "Is this a cane? Is this a cane? Is this a cane?" with every stroke of the whip. And he asked me to kneel down. He instructs you not to cry when he's beating you. And so I tried hard not to cry, but that was my first experience with him actually beating me. Um, I,
I
I,
am
I,
dying to ask like where this man is now, but I'll just let the story
yeah.
go because I'm having all kinds of heart palpitations. I'm just like I
Mm.
can't.
Yeah. So, well, he did beat me. And then from then on, he carried on beating me. And he used to beat my brothers as well, even though they were so little. He used to whip them, horribly. And we, from time to time, they would take us to the hospital for x-rays because we were beaten that badly, horribly, horrifically. He would use anything to beat you, shoes,
Yeah,
heels,
I'm sorry. I did ask you before we started this show
Mhm.
if I could ask you a really direct question.
Please. Yes, please.
Where were your parents?
They were there. They were there.
Who was taking you all to X-ray in the
My
hospital?
mom, my mom. George would always tell us what to say. What did you fell? I fell from the swing, or I fell from the monkey bar, because we had a swing and we had a monkey bar in school. So every time they asked us, that's what we said. We were always, not always, but we were taken for X-rays quite a lot. My brothers and I, my follower, my brother who comes after me, and myself. The younger one wasn't, but the two of us were taken for X-rays. All we ever said was we fell in school. I was playing football and I fell down, and yeah, we had X-rays, and there was a particular incident that happened that prompted me to report to my mom. And I remember, once again, it was always like deja vu to me. I went into her room that day because the beatings were just horrendous. It was nearly every day over little things like, we've come from school and we're walking into the gate too slowly, or you've gone to get changed out of your uniform, you're too slow. You're eating your food, you're too slow at eating. When he calls for you to get your food, you're too slow at getting to the kitchen. It was things like that that would prompt him to just, I don't know if he had anger problems. I have no idea, but he would just start whipping you. And it was a lot for me. So I decided to tell my mom. And just like deja vu, I went into her room to tell her about the beatings. Sat there again with her reading her magazine. And I just panicked and I burst out crying. I couldn't even speak. So she was scared, obviously, but she's a very calm and put together woman. And she calmly asked me, "What's the matter? What's the matter? What's the matter?" And I started having what I know now, that it was a panic attack back then. So I had a panic attack. Yes. And, but I tried and I told her that it's Uncle George who has been beating us, all the x-rays. She was shocked. And she ran out screaming, crying. And, my grand aunts were at home, and she told everybody. They could not believe it, because they saw him as an amazing guy. Like, what? They did not believe it. I was just listening from inside the kitchen, inside the house. And at some point, my grand aunt shouted out that, "Where is she? Tell Manyi to come here and come and defend herself, because he's refusing everything." It sounded to me like he had already convinced them. And so I went out there. As soon as I got out to the yard, he starts shouting and crying. He was already crying. "Why are you lying about this? Why are you lying? I just beat you one time. I only hit you one time. And you're now saying I've been beating you. Why are you lying?" And my mom was sitting there quietly in the corner. She's naturally quiet, but she was just quiet. And she's the one who I told. So I expected her to be, more confrontational towards him, but she wasn't. And so it became really like a Spanish Inquisition. They all started blaming me and asking me, show us the marks. Where are the marks? He was very, very good at like hiding. He would hit me on my palm. He would hit me on parts of my body that were always concealed. So then they would heal. I guess as children, your scars healed quickly. And so there were no marks to show. There were some marks on my back, which I thought were there, but they weren't visible. And I was showing them my back. I said, but all the x-rays, he's the one who sends us to hospital. He tells us to say we fell in school. And no one believed us. My mom had already called my dad.
Your brothers, I mean, your word alone has been enough, but even your brothers?
Yes. So my brothers, they looked up to me. I had told them from the beginning, do not say anything. Do not say any. I told them, don't say anything. They listened to me. Everything I told them, they just said, okay. And I had told them to swear to me, you guys will not say anything because he just keeps beating us and it's just extreme and it's so painful. And, my brothers were always crying. Um, we used to be very lively and loud and happy children. And we had stopped smiling. We were not allowed to smile at each other. He beat us sometimes because we did not have an explanation for why we had just smiled at each other. He beat, yeah. So it was that bad. It was that bad. So on that particular day, my dad came home from work and in his usual way, he called for George and called my mom to the side or in his room, interrogated George, and he made up his mind more or less. So we then had a joint a family meeting in which I sat there, and then George was on his knees in front of my parents, and they asked me the question. They asked him first. My dad asked him, I know I've spoken to you already in my room. Now I want to ask you in front of everyone. How many times did you beat Manyi? He said, oh, just one time, sir. Just one time. Just one time. I don't know why she's lying. And he started crying again. And I jumped up and I was like, Daddy, he's lying. And my dad told me to shut up. And he said, have you started telling lies at 8 years old? You're telling such big lies, such elaborate lies. And I thought, oh my God, what has this guy gone and said to my parents? They had already made up their minds. So I sat there in that meeting with everyone in the house there, little 8-year-old child, trying to defend myself with my dad telling me to shut up the whole time. So cut a long story short, on that day, my dad told him in front of all of us and said, I'm giving you the authority permission that if these kids do not do their homework or they're refusing to eat or they're going to play, which was all this tales he was telling them, I give you the authority in front of my mother, in front of my auntie and this one, that one, to beat them. Of course, he's going to take full advantage of it. The next day, I thought I was going to die because of the way he beat me up. He beat me like crazy. He beat me like crazy. And he beat me with a pestle, so to pound fufu and gari. That's what he used to beat me, lying on the floor. And I had my hips were swollen, my bum was swollen, my back was swollen. And he's the one who used oil. He used manyanga oil actually to massage my back.
So
obviously,
then he massaged you.
Oh yes. And he told me he always said, look at what you've made me do, look at what you've made me do. And I always felt bad that look at what I was making him do. I was the one who was causing him to beat me. And he kept massaging me every day after that. He stopped beating me for a while and would always massage me my back. And then one day he told me to turn over and he starts touching my groin. And I found it odd because he put his fingers all over my groin. And in my mind, I was like, wait, why would anyone want to touch someone where their urine comes out from? But I didn't say anything, but I sat there and he asked me, does it feel nice? And I was like, no, it doesn't. Cause I was tensing up. And he said, well, you know what? If you guys ever do anything again and you don't want me to beat you again, if you allow me to touch you, we will call it touching. If you allow me to touch you, then I'll never beat your brothers and I'll never beat you again. I was thrilled. I was thrilled because it did not hurt. It didn't do anything. I didn't see how that was punishment. I was thrilled. I actually went to my brothers and I told them the great news that there's this thing that he said he would do, and that's all. I just have to lie there. So he used one hand, touched himself, and he used the other hand to touch me. And I was like, it doesn't hurt. And I told them that I'm so glad, God has listened to our prayers. I was happy. So that's how the sexual abuse started. I used to do it all the time, and he became addicted to it. In hindsight, I can see that now. He did it to me during the day, when we came back from school, at night. I was just thankful that he was not beating us anymore. And so that was our little secret, or big secret. I never told anyone. I wasn't going to tell anyone and jeopardize it to make him to start beating me again. I just felt we were happy. And he did it. He would even wake up at night, come and carry me from my bed just to touch me.
I'm sorry, where were your parents?
They were there. And my parents did not, they were there, but not present. communication. There's no one even notices that the child is acting different or looks different or seems different. They were there. So I don't even know how much time I have left, but
Well, this is you have all the time that you need. This is
yeah. So anyway, and the reason why I'm narrating from the beginning and narrating all this is because I need to. There's so many points in my story in which a lot could have been done to prevent what happened, and nothing was done. Yeah, and nothing was done. So it's, to me, it's very important to share as much as I can, because there's so many points at which someone could have intervened and done something and they did not. So from that, obviously, he starts touching me, and then he decided to take it up a notch again. He told me that the thing he had told me about kissing. He wants to show me how it's done. So he, I think it was in the bathroom one night, he said he will show me how it's done. And he asked me, I'm going to get a bit graphic and it might make you feel a bit nauseous, but,
I think for listeners, people are going to need to digest this kind of bit by bit.
And so we pause. Here is a preview of tomorrow's episode.
Touching became a daily thing.
Yeah.
Yes, and he used it to replace beatings, which I was very, very grateful for. One day he said he wanted to teach me what kissing looked like. He bent down. Just the visual of it's disgusting. Somehow I mistakenly burnt my dad's shirt. I was confident that he wasn't going to beat me because he doesn't beat us anymore. All he will do is touch my groin. Iron. He grabbed the iron and marched back to me, and somehow hit me, pushed me onto the floor, and he held the iron at my face here. I still remember what it felt like. He did not press it onto my face, but he held it there, like on my face, on the ground. He always asked me to go wait for him in the toilet. We called it the brown toilet because it had brown tiles. So he always sexually abused me in the brown toilet.
A typical African house is never empty.
Empty, yeah.
So as you're telling me this story, the thing that I keep coming back to is, where is every adult in this house?